Thank you all so much for joining us now for the Q&A with the director-producer of DARA of Jasenovac, Predrag Peter Antonijevic. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, live from Serbia. It's a pleasure that we can do this over Zoom. So I have to admit, I really knew nothing about the concentration camp that's portrayed in the film. And I feel like this is a bit of hidden history in sort of the global understanding of what happened during the Holocaust and World War II. Can you tell us a bit about, I guess, where the story came from and your desire to tell a story about this part of your country's past?
Well, chain of concentration camps known as Jasenovac is not that well known outside of a circle of historians and people who studied Holocaust and people in Balkans, especially in the former Yugoslavia. The rest of the world did not have a chance to kind of learn more about that camp and what transpired there. And Michael Berenbaum, executive producer of the DARA, he is the historian. He can probably give you a little bit more of a background and historic background on that camps.
So let's welcome the executive producer, Michael Berenbaum, to fill in a bit of that for us, because it's certainly not a story that I feel like we've heard much about. So Michael, first of all, I guess, why do you think it is that there has been so little attention paid to what happened in the Croatian camps?
Well, one of the reasons is that Jasenovac is sui generis. It is the one death camp that was not established by the Nazis, and it was established at the initiative of the Ustase government, and it performed a triple function. Two functions that the Nazis wanted them to perform, and one function that was outside of the interest of the Nazis. The first function was to murder the Jews, and also the second was to murder the Roma and Sinti, whom were called pejoratively gypsies. And the third was to murder the Serbs. And even in the film, we have a moment in which the visiting SS officer turns to his Serbian colleague, his Ustase colleague, and he says, why the Serbs? And the answer is very simply because they're Serbs. They used this opportunity, modeling themselves on what the Germans did, to solve what they thought were their local ethnic clash between the Ustase regime and the Serbs. It's 5 camps. One of the unique features also is that there was a children's camp. And we are taken inside the children's camp in its own particular way.
The central Jewish character, Jewish prisoner in the camp, is presented as though she's sort of separate and comes into the part of the camp where Dara and the other Serbian prisoners are. Was there some segregation within the camps between the Serbian prisoners and the Jewish ones?
Not necessarily, because it's simply that the first wave was killing all the Jews, and she's the one who basically is still alive and hanging out there in the camp, doing odd jobs, for the camp leaders. Also, there is the character of a Jewish man who is working on burying the bodies and throwing the bodies into the river of dead people. And essentially, there is one specific line when one of the commanders comes and, poisons all those kids, in the basement, when he says, take down all the Jews if there is any left, and any other sick, kid, because, he wanted to get rid of them. Essentially, it was let's say, the beginning of the war. That was the first, let's say, wave of the murders and killings, but then subsequently they turned onto the Serbs, specifically, and very much so at the beginning of 42, and basically all these ethnic groups share the same fate in the hands of a Croatian Nazis Ustase government.
But the one other aspect of the Jewish prisoner that is interesting is there's a concept in Holocaust history of the gray zone. And that is that bad people who from time to time have a human gesture and a humane gesture, and good people who are coerced into doing bad things. And she was a prisoner under tremendous coercion who tried her best to help other people, even as she was a prisoner who was forced to do other things. We have several characters like that, and that gives you a sense of the intense pressure that the inmates were under and how they tried to retain a certain measure of moral character, even under oppression.
I'd love to know more about Croatia's acknowledgement of what happened and how the camp or the network of camps was really unearthed or brought to public attention. I'm assuming that after the formation of Yugoslavia, there was a certain amount of repression of this history. How did this play out in sort of the national awareness?
Let me give a general rule. Yugoslavia was a combination of multi-nations under the leadership of Tito. And one of the things that uniting diverse nations that had been at war with each other and with tension with each other over a very long period of time is to cover up the past and to impose a collective past on the future. So they didn't grapple with this in the Tito era. After Tito died, Yugoslavia broke up and it came back into different regimes. And the first post-communist or post-Tito elements of Croatia were returning to their own nationalism, which had been repressed for a very long period of time. They had a president by the name of Tuđman, who was part of the denial of what the Croatians had done. In fact, he was invited to the opening of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and there were tremendous protests at that point about the presence of Tuđman precisely because he had not come to terms with it. And part of what this film will do in a very interesting way is to present this history to an audience that has never seen it on the big screen in a way that tells the human story of Jasenovac. And that again, part of what you have to sense in this is it portrays the Croatians in multiple roles, including the role of rescuer. And that is, it begins with a moment of rescue and it ends with a moment of rescue. There's a young girl at the beginning, a woman at the beginning of the film who understands she's about to be deported, understand that her infant child will not survive. And she leaves her child in the bushes to be picked up by a peasant woman and raise the child as her own, almost reminiscent of the Moses story in the Bible, in which he's cast into the Nile as a matter of saving him. That begins at the beginning. We won't talk about the ending to take it away from the audience, but that also is a very important moment of rescue. So it doesn't present them in one dimension, it presents them in multiple dimensions. And that may enable the Croats to approach this history, which is contested history, and experience it in a new way.
That nuance, of course, is important. I'm curious if that's been how it's been sort of taken by a Croatian audience. Not that now that the film is coming out, not that I expect that there's already a I mean, I'm not sure with the pandemic if the film has played theatrically yet, but I mean, tell us a little bit about the reaction that the film's received so far, particularly in the Balkan areas.
Well, we did have a 1 week run in the theaters, last fall to qualify for the Academy. And we tried first to open the picture, then they shut down the theaters, then we tried again, and we managed to have 1 week run, and we decided not to go out in the theaters. And talking about Serbia, because simply the theaters were working on and off, and it was almost pointless kind of going out with the movie. As you know, the situation is the same everywhere. And we decided back then, to postpone the wide release in Serbia towards the end of April, basically April 22nd, the day of liberation of concentration camp of Jasenovac in 1945. Meanwhile, the movie did not play actually in any other Balkan country, except they had the possibility to see, sorry, to view the movie on deadline, I think, and there were like a couple of other moments when people were able to maybe log in and see the movie. However, even not being seen, movie already caused a hell of a controversy, in terms of a relationship of Serbs and Croats. And they even had like competition giving the marks to the movie on IMDb. Croats putting like 1 and then Serbs putting 10, and that was like a very unique situation. I'm talking about people who has not, they haven't seen the movie at all, which means it's a kind of a hot subject matter because it's been lingering between Serbs and Croats now for 75, it will be 76 years. I wish this movie was made 50 years ago because it would certainly help a relationship heal, and maybe to open the discussion, which would eventually lead to some sort of understanding and reconciliation. But as Michael said, Tito built the country based on like pushing certain things under the carpet and calling it its all brotherhood and unity and all nice and peachy, which was not. And then unfortunately, when this recent civil war in the 90s in former Yugoslavia erupted, I think that since many of those questions were left unanswered, they certainly had a play overall in terms of how the ethnic groups felt, about each other. And I suspect that, once the movie is shown, there will be maybe a different approach because people will understand that this movie is not anti-Croatian at all. It makes a clear difference between the Croats and their Ustase Nazi government. As Michael said, we certainly made sure that, good people were shown, also people who walked in a gray zone, which is very important because people under the tremendous stress and pressure and in a life-threatening situations can do both good and evil. As well, we depicted the bad guys, and what we did is really like use all historically proven moments and things which were kind of either in the court after the Second World War or in history books were proven to have taken place. That's why I believe that once when all this initial emotion goes away and audience in Serbia and in Croatia see the movie, there will be discussion. There will be open discussion because I believe in Croatia there are a lot of people who feel uncomfortable about the past and the Nazi past of Croatia, but also there are like some people even nowadays in Croatia who lament and feel very strong about that fascist movement during the Second World War and their animosity towards the Serb and vice versa. Let's be honest. Which means I hope this will be the first brick in the wall of some sort of a discussion about Jasenovac and hopefully better understanding of each other and what transpired back then.
Is Dara's story based on real survivor testimony, or was there anything that was?
Yeah. Basically, it's I would say composite truth. Yes, there was a little girl, like the opening scene when the woman kind of leaves the baby in the bushes, to be rescued by Croatian woman. That little baby is grandmother of one Serbian actress who is not in the movie, but it's kind of a known story because that baby later was able, because she was told by their adopted parents, you know, that she is where she came from, and she was able to track down her siblings, you know. But you know, basically all the events depicted are you know, proven and true. Like you have a scene of music chairs, you know, that scene actually did take place in the school with the kids, not with the you know, adults as it is in the movie, but with the kids. And then they left the teacher alive. You know, they killed, you know, a number of kids during that game, but they left the teacher alive, who then she became like mad, you know, and that was well documented and, you know, exists in documents. But then, like, for instance, you have a love-making scene between those two Nazi officers, the young girl and young boy, during that massacre, during the music chair scene. Yes, that's a sister of a camp commander, Max Luburic, who is also depicted in the movie. She fell in love with a young officer, and they had the best time of their lives during that you know, 4 years of Jasenovac's camp. And that young boy at the end became a commander of the camp himself, and then they escaped to Argentina. Which means, you know, the guy who is guessing the children, you know, yes, that's his name is Ante Vrbanj, did kill in a camp, Stara Gradiška, which was part of Jasenovac's camps. He killed 67 kids one day by throwing a cyclone, you know, on them. And he confessed to that after the Second World War at the trial, and he was sentenced to that and, you know, shot. In other words, there is another character, for instance, who kills the people in front of the train at the beginning of the movie when they're boarding the train, saying, okay, you sick people come over here, you'll be sent to Red Cross and so forth. Yes, that's his name is Frama Istorovic. He was a Catholic priest. You know, in a perverse, you know, way, it's kind of very, very unique story because his wife was Serbian. But he, like, just one night, you know, he gave like a speech in the church and called the Croatian, you know, people, you know, and they went around the villages of city of Banja Luka and they killed like 2,000 people within a day and night. Like his known figure also tried at the court, you know, after the Second World War. But though a lot of these people escaped, including Max Luburic, who was the commander of a camp. And for instance, he gives a speech at the end, towards the end, when there are like kids lined up, dressed up in a Ustase uniform, like all the Serbian kids. And that speech is original speech. It's on radio. You know, you can actually find it on YouTube. And we took just the very ending of the speech for the movie. In other words, we really took care, and Michael especially was helping us with that big time to ensure that we don't go for some sorts of a fiction, because the reality was so horrible that we did not need to create or invent anything else. As Michael guided us very, you know, carefully and wisely, we just kind of let all those events, you know, come forth versus us trying to impose on them.
There are also backstories that become. There's one scene in which a mother refuses to be shipped off to Germany and leave her child behind. The end result is that mother and child are killed. But that's the woman who played the mother was the granddaughter of the woman who had been killed.
Wow.
So you try, Gaga said, my advice always is you don't have to add drama. You have to let the drama come forth, because they face life and death situations all the time. And if you base it on events that happened and you create a composite, you get to a deeper truth and you show it in detail. It's as if the old cliche, the devil is in the details. And that's where you see the power, and the film derives its power from specifics of those details.
The film certainly is unflinching in its portrayal of the horrors of what happened in the camp. So would you talk about the decision then to switch the participants in the musical chairs massacre from children to adults?
this is what happened. Basically, back in the day, when, you know, I was thinking about making the movie on that, you know, camp, on that subject matter, and then I talked to Michael, and Michael wisely, after we discussed that, you know, suggested that we should take a kid's point of view in telling this story. And that kind of gave us two, let's say, advantages, because the entire things we had to present to the audience, to depict, are so horrible that you were not possibly able to kind of withstand if you go all the time with that. You know, the audience will just simply, you know, kind of back off, and we lose the audience along the way because it's such a horrific situation.
Let me help it for 1 second. If you present unflinching horror, the audience freezes. It gets numb. Part of what the child allowed us to do was to allow Gaga to do, really, was to present the horror, see the impact of the horror in the eyes of this young child, and let the audience imagine what those eyes are seeing. And her eyes are so fabulous, and she's so terrific, a natural, because she's not a trained actress. She's so terrific and natural that we see the events as they impact on her eyes, and we then fill in with our imagination the elements of the horror that we did not see. Now, one of the other obligations that Gaga performed so magnificently is you can't let children see these horrors.
Mm-hmm.
So he chose kids from the mountains who had normal lives on farms and seen dead animals and all of that. But he protected these kids, and I'll let him tell you how he did. He protected these kids from seeing the horror, and the actress who played Dara was able to convey that horror with her eyes of stuff she wasn't seeing. That's what made her a great actress.
Basically, we had no choice. We have to show those, you know, horrible events, because if we don't do it, you know, we are not doing justice to the story, because those things did happen. Unlike Germany, when you had this mass execution, you know, guessing the people, you know, in Croatia, they pretty much resorted to very primitive one-on-one kind of a personal way of killing people, using all these various things, the specially curved knife called Srbosjek or Serb slasher, which was constructed by them in order that person committing those crimes will not get tired quickly, because if you're just working with a knife, your wrist can get tired after slashing so many throats, but if it is tied to your wrist here, you know, you can do much more and work for a longer time. And we kind of had to show all these horrible things which transpired. And now the question of obviously was, okay, we have now a child as an actor and other kids who are there and who are to basically act, participate, or witness these very heavy scenes, which are emotionally disturbing, but also can, you know, be very graphic, you know, because either if you show somebody slashing someone's throat, you know, that's kind of for kid to see. In that scene in particular, of course, I put her behind the wall, and she did not see what transpired, because that kind of, I felt, is too much. But, you know, there were other people, you know, other scenes when somebody gets killed, you know, in front of her eyes, talking about the actress. But kids we selected, we went around the villages, mountain Kozara, you know, in northern Bosnia. And when lots of people during the Second World War were taken to Jasenovac from, you know, and we look for the kids which were not in any acting schools or classes before, because we wanted to find a diamond in the rough. And we did find with this little girl. But also these kids coming from the farms, as Michael said, you know, they see the, you know, sheep slaughtered, you know, they see chicken being killed, they see and live with the animals. They have a like different approach. Like, for instance, we kind of got a psychologist, we got all their teachers, from their villages. We got their parents. We brought them, all of them, to the set. We built them a kind of a rec room, that which was mobile, that they can kind of take a break, between the shooting and thinking, okay, we are there with parents, they are with at least one parent all the time, they are with the teacher, they are with the psychologist, and they might need all the support, to kind of, but at the end of the day, the kids were like all of a sudden saying, okay, we don't need this, we understand this is life, this is what happened. And instead of like going and playing on the cell phones games, during the breaks, they would sit down and they would talk, they would sing some songs. They almost like came from some past, they almost like were kids from that time when the events took place.
And Alex, one of the things you should appreciate is that a director's work does not begin on the set, it really begins with casting. Choosing the right people for the right roles becomes an essential part of the success of the film. And in this case, also, since you're dealing with children, and we'll tell you the story, one of the children that Gaga had to deal with was an infant. And consequently, tell the story of Buddha for a moment, Gaga.
I did a movie called Savior back in the day about the Bosnian, civil war in the 90s. And then we had Dennis Quaid carrying a little baby throughout the whole movie. And we were thinking, okay, let's find twins, because twins will help us if one is asleep, maybe we can work with the other one. And now we look for the twins again, and we found triplets. Actually, this is one of three, this kid. But they turned to be so different between, not physically, but emotionally, character-wise, that at the end of the day, we just worked with this one, and clearly we were limited with the time, we shot the movie during the 3 months, 58 shooting days, but we had to kind of hurry because the kids kept growing up, and they had to expand the costume of this little Budo, twice. And then at the beginning, Dara, the Biljana who plays Dara, she's a very tiny girl. She was 10 at the time, but she was very kind of tiny. She was, of course, carrying him, not with ease, but it was okay. At the end, we were joking like now Budo is carrying Dara, because he really grew up. But audience did not notice that because we decided to shoot a movie in order. That made it very difficult for production, but it made sense because kids were then easily getting into their roles and what's happening next, and also allow us to a certain extent to hide the growth of the kids during 3 months, because they were at the age when that kind of kids will grow like this,
Considering how often in the script of the film the baby has to cry as a story point, really, how did you achieve that?
Waiting game, because this is what they have their needs, and they are to a certain extent predictable, because mother knows them and say, oh, he would normally sleep after the lunch, this, blah, blah, blah. But really doesn't happen all the time exactly by what we think he would do. And we will make a plan like, okay, we'll feed him then, and then, we need a scene when he should be asleep, and we wait for him to fall asleep, then we bring him camera, we prep everything quietly, we put him in the shot, but then he wakes up, and then starts crying. And there were moments when there were like 300-400 people, extras and crew, included waiting for little Budo, to either wake up or for 2 hours, 3 hours. But we knew we were encounter that, and oh boy, I'll tell you, because kid is so cute and so they did such a great job. I can't imagine, how. I mean, we were very lucky, very lucky.
And how about the relationship between the baby and the actress who plays Dara? Because this, handling a baby is a daunting task, even for an adult. But
what we started is we kind of brought them together way before starting the shooting, and she was spending a time with him, and she was, trying to feed him and carrying him around, and basically they became very close. But then, of course, at certain moments when kid gets little, ready to cry, then only mother can help, and even mother sometimes can't help, has to cry it out first and then you continue. But it was really a lot of things we kind of thought through prior to the, shooting, and sometimes we kind of predicted things right, but sometimes we also failed because we are all humans, it's very difficult.
If you're director of a film in which you have kids, you need three qualities. You need flexibility, you need patience, and you need to know that however well you plan it, you're going to be surprised.
Yep, exactly.
But that's true of parents as well.
So knowing that the actress who plays Dara was not a professional actor going into this, I'm curious if you can talk through, as a director, some of, we know the benefits. Obviously, there's an authenticity that's undeniable. What are some of the challenges?
Well, you have to merge them with the professional actors.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of everything has to look kind of like they come from the same place. And, that's why also the approach I took with the adults, or other actors, was that they were divided in two groups, basically. This group which played those Nazis, they came from Belgrade, because it's one school of acting. The mothers and those women and all these, people in the camp, they came from Bosnia. It's a slightly different school of acting, and also it's a slightly different dialect, and dialect which matches the dialect of a young girl. And she felt more comfortable in that, environment, and blended in much better in the surrounding, with the professional actors. Because had she been from a Belgrade young kid, because they're like, if you meet 3 million people in Belgrade, I probably could have found a kid there, but it will come from totally different background, and with totally different, language and understanding of life, and it will just simply not be possible to put that kid in these circumstances with these actors who were from, Bosnia.
I'd like to also talk about the production design. How much of the camp still exists, and how much was recreated through?
None. Basically, Jasenovac was knocked down. We don't have anything right now, and basically Ustase destroyed most of it, and then the communists kind of also decided to build a monument, and whatever was left, they kind of took it away, because they certainly did not want that camp to be there. There is a monument now in that camp, but there were some photos, there were some other, there was some archive footage. We were able to reconstruct that camp number 3, which had a distinguished gate, and it was built around a brick factory. And that's why basically it looks pretty close to what those photos show. They were not detailed photos, but they were like from a distance, and also there was some archive footage. There was also rail tracks, bringing people to that camp in particular. That's something also which we had to build, and we brought a train and cargo cars, by trucks, and we kind of put that, in front of the camp, that it can kind of bring the people in, because that was train is significant, basically metaphor of all these horrible things which happened in a Second World War,
And historically, train tracks are very important, because the camps were built to replace mobile killing by making the victims mobile and bringing them to stationary killing centers. So all of them, all of the Nazi camps were located, with the exception of one, were located on major rail lines. Auschwitz, for example, had 44 parallel railroad tracks. So it was a massive infrastructure that allowed the camp to be built and to be created there. And therefore, he chose a brick factory, which had the railroad lines. And consequently, all of that was able to substitute for what was destroyed and covered up and covered over.
What kind of records still exist in terms of documenting who was there, who survived, who didn't?
The memorial has 83,000 names of people who were killed there.
Mm-hmm.
And their historians have an imprecision as to the number of people killed at the camp. The imprecision goes from 80,000 to 1 million. And it's what we call contested history. But the camp itself was able to document 83,000. There were a number of survivors. We do have survivor memoirs, but the history itself is contested history that struggles in all sorts of ways. With how to come to a conclusion. Even today, there's a scholar who's advancing the idea that it's 1 million people, but 1 million people don't appear out of nowhere and don't disappear out of nowhere. So we tend to see a figure that is somewhere in the 90, 100,000 range.
Also, what's very important to mention is that around the whole country, a lot of people were killed in their villages, in their houses, in the forest, while they were running away. And a lot of people did not make it to the camp, which means it's a very difficult, pretty much, I believe, to exactly say how many people perished. And as Michael said, it is a contested history, as you would say, but unfortunately the numbers go from like this was not a death camp at all. So some Croatians are claiming that, to, as Michael said, million, which I think is even what's the name? Europe from Israel says it's 800,000, etc., which means the numbers should be, whatever they are horrible. I think the numbers should be put aside and left aside, because.
But what makes this film again unique is not numbers. It's not a documentary. It's telling a story. And Stalin once said that millions of people is a statistic. One person is much more dangerous. It's a story, it's a narrative, it's someone we can identify with, it's someone we can feel, someone we can sense, and someone in whom we can see a part of ourselves going through it. So if you talk about the numbing effect of seeing violence, you also have to experience the numbing effect of hearing statistics. Mm-hmm. We see it today during the COVID epidemic. The number 450,000 who died doesn't resonate as much as hearing the story of one person who was taken away in the peak of life by a terrible disease that could have been prevented.
I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit more about what kind of justice occurred at the post-war trials, just to get a sense of the international understanding.
Yeah, let me say, there can in one sense be no justice in the aftermath of so great an event. In tragedy, the price paid balances somehow the lessons learned. In atrocity, there is no way to balance between the price that was paid and the lessons that were learned. What those of us who work in this field try to do is to recover something from the ashes. What is the attempt at justice? The attempt at justice is to rebuild the scaffolding of justice, the illusion of justice, even the dream somehow of symbolic justice or restorative justice, but it can't be actual justice because so many committed so many crimes and so few have been tried. There are two ways in which the world deals with it. One is the Nuremberg principle, where you try the top leaders and you try also the top institutions. The other is the South African model in what we call going from the bottom up. Truth and reconciliation. You tell the truth and you implicate those above you. So one is top down, the other is bottom up. And the idea behind both of them is to somehow achieve a sense of justice in the aftermath.
I want to just wrap up by asking a little bit about the distribution plans right now, because I know that the film is about to open in the United States. I think at very least on a sort of streaming VOD platform, maybe a Lemley Virtual Theater, something like that. Do you know much about the ways in which the audience watching now can recommend this film to their friends?
I think it's better if somebody from 101 Studios gives you detailed, explanation. I was just, traveling last few days, and I'm not quite sure what exactly the plan is. I saw some emails, I know that movie is opening in some cities, but in terms of a VOD and everything else, that would be better. It would be better to us.
Sure.
101.
Fair enough. Well, I'll look it up and we'll put that into the introduction before we start the film tomorrow night.
How to reach an audience today is a mystery, and you try. The best way to say it is there's an old proverb. When somebody closes the door, you better try the window. And the doors are shut, therefore we have to open many windows and find a way to distribute it and get it seen, because this is a film well worth distributing and well worth seeing. Absolutely.
Though I do hope there is some opportunity for the theatrical experience, especially a film that's this engrossing in a completely different world than what people here in Los Angeles are living through. Having the power of it on the big screen would really be something.
It's a collective experience.
I know.
In other words, you not only experience what you're experiencing, but you sense what everybody else is experiencing at the same time. And one of the problems of our moment of quarantine is we're denied collective experiences.
Thank you both so much. I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to talk about this film, and I really hope that people will continue to discover it, that everyone that's watching will make sure to get the word out about it. And best wishes for the next several months as we continue to figure out how to get back into a movie theater.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Gaga, have a good evening. And Michael, I assume, since I can see in the background some light, that it's not the middle of the night for you.
So.
I'm in LA.
Okay.
I'm in LA.
Great.
Yeah.
Gaga,
I'll be back shortly.
One question, Gaga. I sent you an email yesterday in which they asked about who that woman was who walked into the camp. The rescuer woman. The reviewer asked what the name of the actual woman was. I'll send
Meaning
it to
that the woman who
at the end who rescued
the baby or the
woman the woman who rescued with the Red Cross.
That's Diana Budisavljevic. That's
Okay.
known for her. That's the woman who actually worked on saving the kids permanently. Yes, the kids were later, some of them, adopted by Croatian families. Some of them, made convert to Catholic faith. But she saved their lives. And unfortunately, she was not able to preserve her archives because when communists came to power, Yugoslavian communist state secret police basically came and took all the archives. And then when the struggle occurred, when some people, we had even one prominent actress who basically discovered, she thought she was Croatian, she discovered that she was Serbian, and etc., etc. People were struggling. That's another story. It's worth the movie, when they were trying to trace their beginnings. But her name was Dijana Budisavljevic. She was an Austrian woman, married to the surgeon in Zagreb, who actually took care of top Ustase Nazi leaders. And because she was very persistent, they allow her to come in and rescue the kids, and she is the one who should be really remembered like Schindler, on the same type of a figure, and God bless her soul.
Thank you. Take care, Gaga. Look forward to seeing you in Los Angeles.
All the best. I can't wait. It's cold here, guys. It's cold. I have a hat. I have a shawl, and that's what it is, What can we do? See you and thank you.
And we're suffering with 70-degree weather. It's terrible.
Well, then stay safe and stay warm.
Okay, you too. Thank you, Alex.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Alex.